competition, and we have yet to hear, and I think we'll hear before our awards day. Okay, and it's like a diary, so she's going to read maybe 1 or 2 days of it. Is that what you've done? Okay, so kind of set us up and tell us what's going on in it.
I think I'm going to read this one. It's on May 8th, and it's where she's finally getting down 12 miles from the Chisholm Trail. It says, "Thankfully, I finished 12 miles down the Chisholm Trail. I swear, as I rode past the 11th mile marker, I was so relieved I could have jumped out of my saddle, out of my clothes, leapt off Cash, and ran that mile myself, and not care if them rustlers saw me naked leaping for joy. I almost did, but I decided to keep my clothes on. I took Cash's rein in my hands and started running. I looked back to see if Cash was all right. When I looked back, I was not happy. Cash had many flies dancing on his hide. They moved mockingly in a practice dance, so I would never be able to hit one without hitting Cash. So I shook his saddle and they flew off, plotting to return as soon as I looked away. I looked down to check his girth. It was twisted backward. I held onto the horn of his saddle. He nipped at his back for the flies had returned, and then he used the john on my boot. "Wow, nice shot," I replied. Then I hopped back up on the saddle, put my feet in the stirrups, and leaned farther back into the cantle. Giddy up, and we went down the Chisholm Trail, 2 friends, human and animal. After about another five minutes, I saw a little campsite that had been worn down over many trips from our ranch. Cash and I had made it. And then there was this one right here. It says, "Dear Clever, May 15th, 1871. Well, it turns out they didn't leave me. I was appointed as a 3rd drag and was ordered to keep away while the crew was working. Crazy Tom has been the nicest, kindest, telling me stories and always trying to include me, but they don't call him Crazy Tom for nothing. His eyes twitch, and anyone with sense does not want to be around him when he's got his gun out because he has an itchy trigger finger. Tana has also been nice, but he's kind of against the idea of us women wandering about, so he probably just gets paid an extra $5 to deal with me." Later that day. As we were riding along, I could feel the herd was getting restless. Cows are lazy and they don't like to move too much, and if you push them too hard, they start to stampede. Ross is new to this and does not have too much experience. I don't either, but I am better with animals than him. He drove the cattle real hard, pushing them tighter and barely stopping for a break. Cash didn't look too good either. He was sweating, and when he did take a break, his saddle was always wet underneath the blanket. But then it happened. The cows started to rush faster and faster. More dust flew up into the sky, and I was blinded in the back as drag. Others started to freak out. Others looked at this as the downside of the trail, and I didn't. I looked at this as a chance to prove myself. I roped a lingering jag and started to pull it forward. I got a ton of nasty swears coming off Drew and heading in my direction. I dodged them like bullets and didn't care. This was my element. Sadly, the pressure on Crazy Tom must have been too much. Bang, bang, bang is all I heard before I realized the drag I had roped was dead and there was a new hole in my hat. The gunshot startled Cash and it got him jumping. I had to calm him down and stroke his neck and tell him everything was going to be all right. Then that night I had first watch. The cattle were moving and stirring, settling down for the night. I rode around camp on Cash's back, turning him in for the night. Tomorrow I would ride on a new horse, Pretty, and Dan would take care of Cash. I was surprised when Ross came behind me and asked one question. Would you like to be swing? I saw you rope that cow, and I was happier than a newborn stallion. I give it to you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was thinking it was free. I was thinking of your haunted whatever, the pumpkin deal. I was thinking it was separate. Okay, there you go. Dream Walkers. She's renamed this.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to hear.
It's really about a ghost that's haunting a school, and so the ghost's name is Grace. Joking. But it says it starts like this. I felt the wind blow past my ear. The blaring sounds of the siren was nothing but a pestering noise in the back of my mind. The wisp of hair glided across my nose, begging for me to sneeze, and I stared at the ceiling of the ambulance. My friend's steady breathing beside me, my body ached all over from bruises, and my stomach lurched for food. We had been trapped, Ellie and I. We had been through what no one would have thought was possible, what was. I stretched out my hand. The tips of my fingers tingled. Ellie shot at her hand, and our fingers intertwined. Ellie and I called it the friendship lock. When we had been trapped in the school, everything was different. Our lives were in danger, and we realized how much we needed each other for survival. This I'll never forget, the feeling of true fear and a real situation you might not make it out and how every beat of your heart counts. Our ambulance reached to a stop. I let go of Ellie's hand as we were wheeled out onto our gurneys and taken into the hospital. Ellie was still bleeding. We made it up the stairs and they had to put us on 2 stiff beds. The last thing I remember was being inserted with needles and my eyes started to close. I remember Ellie's whelps of pain as they tended to her wounds. It was a dream, I told myself, a bad dream, and I was the victim of something that wasn't real. And when I closed my eyes, I would wake up with everything back to normal, but I didn't. I woke up again, bobbing back and forth from consciousness to unconsciousness, and only grasping in my mind little glimpses from time to time. The third time I was about to drift into unconsciousness, I forced myself awake, afraid to go back to sleep. I instantly regretted it. As I laid there, all the aches and pains seemed to come back in small waves, then larger. My EKG beeping at the sounds of my heartbeat like a steady drum. I licked my lips with my dry, parched mouth burned as it made contact with my tongue. I yearned for food, for I had not had a morsel for now 3 days. I looked around the room and saw I had a visitor. He noticed my gaze. "How's Daddy, little girl, doing?" "How do you think?" I wheezed. He grimaced. "So what really happened in there?" It was my turn to frown, but I gave him an uncanny smile, not wanting to say aloud what had happened. "Are you sure you want to know?" Only if you are willing to repeat it. To be honest, wanting to repeat it. To be honest, I didn't. But it would be a lot easier to get it off my chest and tell someone who I can trust. "Okay, Dad, it's fine." I sucked in my breath, ready to spill secrets of a haunted locker. I stared across the classroom, longingly watching the clock, wondering if it would go by any faster. Had it just been 2 minutes or 2 hours, time would not tell. Miss Partridge, our English teacher, glared blankly at her desk. She didn't move, and in an act almost as quickly as lightning, she jerked her head up. Her nose flared, her eyebrows in a posture of the inquisitive look. She glared at me. I looked back, her eyes like orbs, glassy and unaware. As I was looking at her, she seemed to smile, and as quickly as it came, it left. She frowned. "Thomas, see you after class. You know the rule, no phones." I chewed on the tip of my pencil, nervously glancing around the room. I glanced at Miss Partridge, and revisited what had I just seen. Was she having a fit? Should I get the nurse? I concluded the thought with a no. She's just tired, but I was not telling the whole truth. I stored the memory away and put it in a place called to be continued. When time seemed to move again, the school bell rang. People rushed out of the classroom like the building was on fire, and I, small and timid, was swept away. As I made it to my locker to put my English books and grab my science books, a girl my age fell and her books spilled amongst the floor. I leaned down to help her. When we finished picking up the book, she said, "Thanks so much." She stuck out her hand. "The name's Ellie." "And you?" I stared from my hand to hers. "Willow Vale. But my friends just call me Willow." She dropped my hand and suddenly blushed. "Sorry about that. I'm a little bit of a klutz. I'm also new, which doesn't help much." By the time she was striving for conversation, so I took pity and asked, "So where'd you move from?" "Florida," she replied. "And by the way, do you know where science is located?" For 10th grade, that's my next class. "Same," I said, and I led her down in the hall. The students had calmed down slightly, and there was much less hassle. We went then straight down. We talked about our classes, the teachers, and how her dad was in the Army. "We have to relocate every 2 years. I mean, I love my dad, but it'd be nice to just stay put for a while." She smiled, but it didn't touch her eyes. As we entered the classroom, I saw her muscles clench, and as she held onto her books tight, I knew how she felt, the feeling of being new and not knowing anyone. The eyes of our classmates seemed to burn into Ellie, and with that, she felt self-conscious. I led her to the empty seat, and I myself sat down. Sean sat across from me, shooting spitballs through a black straw towards Edward. He finished, but didn't move. As Miss Janae kept droning on, I put my head in my arms and groaned quietly. At some point, I must have fallen asleep. And then this is there's a paragraph here. It says, "I was popular and rich. Everyone adored me because they had to, or they would pay. I walked past the nerd herd on my way out, and as I passed, they snickered and frowned. I started to head down the 9th grade hall when I came upon a staircase. I didn't even have time to put my foot down before bang, roll, crack. My heart raced and then stopped. I jerked, awake screaming. I had tears on my face, and I had to take many a deep breath before I finally, "Oh," said my dad, "that's why you were screaming in the middle of the night." He then looked at me and, continue on. As I was saying, before I could calm down, I had to take many breaths. I soon went back to sleep.